right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Actually, it's just a minute after noon, but I know we're going to be held to our time frames. I want to make sure we leave lots of time for interaction. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session on landing your next role. Pleased to introduce to you Anita Breedlove, who is our Alliance board member and leads our ambassador program. Don't be distracted, Anita, by all the hellos coming through the chat on the side.
Hi, Amelia.
And then Morgan Randazzo, who is also an Alliance ambassador and our onboarding ambassador extraordinaire. If you've been onboarded in the Alliance in the last couple of years, you know Morgan, and certainly happy to be on this panel with the two of them. My name is Kerri Wilson, and I am moderating this panel, and will try to manage it the best I can. You'll notice that most of the interaction will happen through the chat feature, so please feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions or give your input, feedback along the way. Morgan's going to manage the chat, and we'll do our best to answer the questions as we go. But we really do encourage participation. It's kind of weird sitting in a room by yourself looking at a screen, getting nodding heads or some feedback. So please share your thoughts, opinions, questions along the way, and we'll do the best we can to answer them. Morgan did mention all the sessions are being recorded, so if we miss anything, we'll be able to get back to you following the session. Did I miss anything, ladies? Are we ready to dive in?
I think we're ready.
All right. So again, the theme, we have a couple of different themes around landing your next role or your next position, because it may be a position within the same company. But the market looks a lot different today than it did at the beginning of the year. COVID-19, unfortunately, has changed the landscape from both an employment and hiring perspective in most industries, I would say. And the result has been a number of different changes with downsizing, furloughs, et cetera. And so the question for both of you is, how has COVID-19 impacted either of you, directly? And then we'll talk a little bit about how it's impacted our organizations as well. Morgan, I'm wondering if you'd like to kick off with just kind of sharing your story about how COVID-19 impacted you and what you did about it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my story starts in April of 2020. That is when my furlough began. It lasted about 3 months. And, in the beginning, I think it was incredibly frustrating from the aspect of being furloughed to the aspect of COVID in general. So I think everybody can kind of relate to that. Not knowing what or how the situation was going to play out, with my job, with the industry, with toilet paper, and in the beginning, I struggled with the idea of, how could this be happening to me? And if you listened to the session earlier with Ann Schnur about navigating change, I now know that I was going through the steps. And it made me question things, whether my position in the company was ever needed or, essential. And I came to realize that it wasn't really about me, right? It wasn't about my performance. It was about finances and executive leadership needing to make hard decisions, to keep our company going. And, once I accepted this and accepted this new normal, things really started to change. And I spent a lot of time painting my house. I'm not going to lie to you. But I also spent a lot of time soul searching, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I decided to do, a deep dive into career planning and goal setting. And I made a decision to sit down and really answer those questions that I had. What do I want to do being a 31-year-old first time furlough, and where do I want to be, what industry do I want to be in, so I did a lot of that, and I then entered into the COVID workforce in July 2020 with the new company PriMedical Incorporated, and now I'm learning all the new ways to exist in this new kind of challenging environment. And so yeah, that's a little bit about me. in my story with COVID.
Thanks, Morgan. I know you were very intentional about going about your job search effort and what you were looking for, and luckily found it, and hopefully we wish you the best of luck in your new role. Anita, you had kind of a different animal to tackle during all of this, similar but different. Do you want to talk a little bit some of the specifics to your situation and your transition?
Yeah, so I took a little bit of a different path. I decided to start my own business. But I think, I went through that same process as Morgan did of evaluating, what do I really want to do? It was a great opportunity to say, am I passionate about what I was doing? And do I want to keep doing that? Or do I want to do something completely different? And, I really, I think for a lot of people, the pandemic has given us the opportunity to kind of think about our future and think about what we are passionate about, and having the opportunity to to do something different, whether you're looking for a promotion or a new job, or you want to be self-employed. The planning and the consideration and knowing your own worth and knowing that you are more than your job. All of those, paths are critical in determining what it is you're passionate about and what you want to do. And remember that any job that you have, you're going to be spending the majority of your time at that job. So if you can do something that you're passionate about, that's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for whoever you're working for, and it's a win-win for your family and yourself. So just keep in mind that you are more than your job, and know that you're more than what you do for a living.
You ladies are going to kill me for doing this, but I'm kind of off the reservation here, and I wanted to say, you both talked a lot in the planning for this about how you planned. And so I think it's important not just to say you planned, but what are the steps that you took in that planning? You mentioned soul searching, you mentioned finding things you're passionate about, but then you have to be really deliberate about looking for that next job, right? So what kind of tools did you use? What did you do in that planning to bring you to where you both went?
I can go first. I think, I finally stopped painting my house. I think Pat was very thankful for that. Home Depot was not. And then I started really thinking about things at first that I didn't even realize I was kind of going through this process. And I started thinking about things that I loved about my previous role, things that made me really happy and excited. And then I started thinking about things that I really didn't like. And, that really led me to, career planning and strategic planning. If you don't know me, I'm very type A. So I do like planning. So I wrote out my goals. I wrote out goals for 6, 12, 24 months. I've never really done that before short term. I've always had, big dreams, and that's what my goal was. But I think, sitting down and really narrowing down those things really helped me, because I think so often people find themselves in, a job and they're doing it for the pay, right? But I read some things from some recruiters, and I think it's so important that you're never going to feel that fulfillment if you don't have that passion with what you're doing and spending so many hours of your life doing, right? So, and then I think the final thing I really did, which is research. I used my network of people. I talked to Anita a lot and said, do you think this is a good role for me? I talked to my mentors. I researched Glassdoor to see if that company was going to be a good fit for me. And, not to make this all 2020 and, all about COVID, a lot of these soul searching exercises that I was doing and questions I was trying to answer, I think come up in everybody's, career life, right? I think everybody, either hits a plateau or maybe gets furloughed with the pandemic. But everybody wants to make that right next step, right? So I think our experience, or I think that, you know, I felt so concerned, and so I got to find a job, I got to find a job. And I think once I got out of that and really did that exercise, you know, it really helped me decide, you know, where I wanted to be and what my goals were. So that's a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I would just add, you know, whatever company that you want to work for, culture, you know, is really critical. And so when you're doing your research, when you're planning for a new role, make sure that you're looking at the kind of organization that you want to join, and that you're looking at that culture and making sure that that culture matches up with your own personal values. And that, you know, because if, as we said earlier, you're going to be working at least 8 hours a day. And so you need to make sure that you're working for an organization that you respect and that you're aligned with in your goals. But back to your planning conversation, or your planning question, Kerri, you know, again, I think it's research and looking at the organizations and looking at what your next steps are, and looking at where your passions are.
Yeah, and your strengths and weaknesses, I think, too, you know, really knowing, am I going to be good in that role? Or, you know, is this role something that's going to, you know, show my weaknesses? And is it not going to be something that I'm going to enjoy? I think all those things, you know, really come together. And when you know what you're looking for, it's a lot easier. So.
Right. I mean, we're gonna talk about, you know, it's just as important to know what you want in a job as it is important to know what you don't
Just like
want in a
everything
job.
else in
So we're
life,
going to
right?
talk about all of those things.
In a partner, in a neighbor.
Right.
You pick. It's important to know what you're looking for and what you're not. And I know for both of you that you were patient and you were discriminating. You had options and you chose to forego those options for what you felt like was a right fit for both of you. And I think that's a really important part as well. The first thing that comes up, like you said, Morgan, it's not just a job. If you care, if you're passionate about it. And I know we spent some time with the Alliance last year just talking about the future of work and aligning yourself with the purpose of an organization. That you think it's so important, because when you care, you're going to give your all, right? And then that's mutually beneficial. Absolutely. One other little piece to add to kind of how this whole 2020 landscape has changed the employment space, I'll say from an employer perspective, from one who is looking at hiring and looking at our workforce, adaptability has been the most critical thing that has shown its head this year. Like every other organization, we really had to pivot. We had to do some things that weren't necessarily what our core fundamentals were. Luckily, we're in a place where we were able to use that to help some of our clients, help some injured workers in different ways. But I think it just showed that if people get stuck in a routine and they're not able to flex, you have less options. And so if I, from my perspective, can think of anything that this has taught me and has taught me leading an organization and being part of an organization, it's we all have to be adaptable. We all have to. You gotta be the branch that bends so you don't break. So that was one little piece of feedback I had in there. All right. So if there's not, I don't see anything in the chat around that topic. So we'll move on to just some tips for, elements in making the decisions that each of you did. You've touched on it a little bit about what was important from a purpose standpoint, but how did you take a situation that one might think was really negative, being furloughed, and especially at a time like this, and make those lemons into lemonade, to steal your line there, Morgan?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the on the spot question, I kind of talked a little bit about, how I did make lemons into lemonade. And I think, once I came out of that first step of change, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to Anjner's talk earlier with Janine about that. And once I got out of that, I think it really started to change the conversations I was having. I became more present. I knew what I wanted. I was very precise and specific with the conversations I was having. Yeah, like I said before, we're all trying to make that right next step, and I think using some of these tools and exercises, it really helps in that planning to get you to, where your goals are.
Thank you. And I know we talked about the difference.
Yeah,
sorry, Anita.
Sorry, go ahead, Kerri.
I definitely want to turn to you. Just kind of the difference between as you're looking to make transitions, and those transitions can be a new job, it can be a promotion within the same company, it can be taking a whole different path, starting your own company and going out on a new. So I wanted to turn it over to you and hear about how you turned those lemons into lemonade and anything else you might want to.
Well, for me, I think I knew I wanted to start my own business. It's something I've been thinking about for, a long time. And I've always had kind of side things going on. And Morgan, I think, called it my side hustle. And, just knowing that I wanted to be my own boss and do my own thing. So that part of it was a little bit easier for me. But planning and trying to determine if I could actually do that, if I could actually branch out on my own, if I could cover my medical, costs, my insurance costs, all of those things. So, just as you're looking for another, as you're researching a company for another job, when you're thinking about doing your own business, you have to think about a whole different set of things. And so, just that planning that we're talking about is just so critical to the process, and making sure, that you look at all of the potential pitfalls as well as all of the potential positive things that are going to come out of it. So, be honest with yourself, be honest with the process, and whether we're talking about a promotion within your own organization, moving to a different department, or changing jobs completely, it's the same planning and consideration is required.
Good deal, thank you. And I think it might be valuable to shift to sitting in a seat where maybe you are looking to add to your team or hiring new employees. Has this current situation changed what a good candidate looks like? Does it look different than pre-March of 2020? And is there something different you would be looking for if you're looking to add to your team or hire new people for your organization? Would either of you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that comes to my mind when you say that is this the non-competes, because there are a lot of salespeople out there with non-competes, and make sure that you remember the commitment that you made when you signed that non-compete. And when you're looking for a new employer, they may not be in a position to legally defend you, or you may not be in a position yourself to fight that non-compete. So just remember the commitment that you made around that non-compete. And the other thing, I think, going back to your question, Kerri, even sales roles look different now. I think when we looked at salespeople, we were looking for people who were willing to be road warriors and were willing to sit in front of customers, and with a few exceptions, that's not going to happen for a while. And so, that job certainly has changed, and it is a very different skill set to sit on the phone or on a Zoom conference than it is to sit in front of a customer and talk about your products. So yeah, I think definitely in sales, a salesperson that you're hiring today would look very different than a salesperson you
I think,
hired
Morgan,
a year
you
ago.
mentioned getting used to the new sales landscape and getting your hands on technology and how to use it appropriately.
Yeah, the new world of Zoom with your clients, and my fiance walking through the background. It's a whole new world these days. It looks like we have a question, a live one. Do you have any advice for how to have that conversation with your manager about landing that next role or promotion, or even to request adding headcount to your team, especially given a climate where companies may be hesitant to hire or promote? I think that's you.
Yeah, I'll start with the first part of that question, Megan. I think asking for a promotion, your manager should always know that you're interested in a promotion. So whether you do that in your performance review or in a separate conversation, letting them know first that you are expecting, you're interested in a promotion. And I just use the word expecting, but I don't want to confuse that with entitlement, because it's a very different situation when you are acting entitled versus when you're expecting something. So, my first suggestion would be in your performance review that you're asking, you're telling your manager that you are interested in that promotion. And if they say, that there aren't any jobs or that you're not ready, then you need to ask specifically what you need to do to be prepared for that next promotion and when you can expect that next promotion. And frankly, if that doesn't happen for you, and I know there are a lot of ladies on this call that have been in that situation where it didn't happen, and so they moved to a different department or a different job, but you own your future, and your value, and you have to make sure that you're going after what you want. And again, always making sure that your manager knows that you're looking for that next step. So if you move within the company to a different department, they're not caught off guard. You can say, I had this conversation with you. I was hoping to, to advance within our department, but there just wasn't anything available, and I needed to make this change for me personally. So, being upfront and honest and asking what you need to do, and also being willing to accept that feedback of the things that you need to do better or different to be recognized for those accomplishments. And then, making sure that you are bringing to their attention what your accomplishments are, because nobody else is going to do that for you. You have to be able to articulate what you bring to the table. So, that would be my advice for.
Yeah, and I think that's
manager.
a really good time to, reassess your goals too. I've learned in the past, year, some new things, and reassessing your goals and changing them is okay, and if your manager is giving you that feedback, I would revisit my goals and say, okay, this was part of my goal, but I have to make this adjustment to get to that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Great. If I could add in here, I think one of the things that's really important to the latter two questions that Megan asked is what are you going to bring to the organization if you are asking for a promotion or you're asking to add headcount? A personal frustration of mine is when someone comes to me with this fabulous plan, but no steps toward execution or how the organization is going to benefit from executing that plan. So if you know that you've got financial limitations, every company does, right? You've got profit margin goals or you've got revenue goals, and adding to the headcount is going to impact the bottom line. You've got to be upfront about how this change is going to impact that. It may be that by adding headcount, you're adding productive employees who are actually going to increase your opportunities at revenue. Spell that out, make the case for the addition or the promotion. Show that you understand that as a leader in an organization, you've got to look at the bottom line. because it's great to come up with all these ideas, but unless you really can show how to execute them and an understanding that this stuff doesn't happen for free. It takes time, it takes money. People are expensive.
Right.
If you can articulate how that's going to pay the company back in the short or in the long term, I think that will go a long way to getting somebody on board. And if you're having the open conversation with your manager that Anita talked about, which I so agree is important. I mean, I always want to know where my people are headed so I can help them get there. You can't if they don't know what they're advocating for.
Absolutely.
And if you come to them with a great plan that's well thought out, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that won't support you. And if they don't, then that's a whole different topic that we'll need another section.
Yeah, I agree. We do have another question. Can you discuss the best way to build your network, especially when you work more in the back of house functions?
Yeah, I think things like the Alliance of Women in Workers' Comp is a great way to build your network. Also, LinkedIn is a great way to build your network. Joining groups on LinkedIn or joining groups. I know there's not as many live groups anymore, but every city has a claims association, and just any opportunities to interact with people. I mean, you really never know. You really, truly never know where you're going to meet somebody, or what you're doing that might end up being your next career or whatever. So, networking is absolutely critical, and use all the resources available to you. Twitter groups, LinkedIn groups. I mean, just everything that's available to you to build your network. And helping other people. One of the things that was nice for me during this pandemic is I had an opportunity to do some volunteer work, and one of the people that I volunteered with turned out to be someone that was able to help me with something. So you just that whole pay it forward thing, helping others, really does result in things coming back to you. So, that would be my suggestion,
I agree.
Wendy.
The Alliance has been a huge support network for me. But also I asked everybody. I asked, people that I've met a couple times, what do you think about this? And I asked people who I've known for years, and I think when I asked those questions, my network started to grow because these people were having these meaningful conversations with me. And it wasn't just like, hey, can we go to lunch so I can sell you something? It was, what should I do with my life? And it sounds crazy, but people love helping people. And I know sometimes we don't believe that, but I think if you just bring your authentic self to the table, your network will grow. But I definitely, along the lines of what Anita said, the Alliance is a great place to start. And then, maybe you start looking into different parts of the industry that you're interested in and have a passion for. We do have one more question that I think we should just answer real quick. How did you know the company culture would be a good fit? Oh, this is me. I take Glassdoor reviews with a grain of salt, and most company websites feel like fluff. Ideally, I want to hear firsthand accounts from current or former employees. Is it appropriate to reach out on LinkedIn and ask? Ooh. So I didn't reach out to former employees or anything like that, but I think we can all agree that the work comp space is, a smaller community, and everybody has an opinion about everything. So I was able to find people in my network and really talk through, different companies and what they were all about. And yeah, I take Glassdoor reviews with a grain of salt as well, but you can kind of get a feel for the environment and how things are handled from one person's perspective, at least. I wouldn't make a decision on that, but I don't know. Do you have anything to add on that?
I would also, yeah, I do. I would also, ask the people that you're interviewing with, How did they like their job? You know, how did they like the company? A lot of times you will get authentic answers when you ask those questions. And I agree, you know, a lot of people on Glassdoor or any of those sites, it's the people who are very upset that tend to comment. And so you really do have to take it with a grain of salt. But if there are 50 of those comments, you know, that kind of turn you off, then it may not be the right culture.
I think
for
if
you.
You're trying to really research companies up front before you land the opportunity to apply or be interviewed, it really is all about, you know, networking and reaching out to people who either have worked with that company. I mean, some of the best input might come from clients or folks that know people that work there. It doesn't necessarily have to be people that work in the organization today, because that might get a little sticky. But this is such an incredibly important piece to this, like to do your research to make sure it's an organization that you even want to talk to from the beginning. It really is mostly going to be, in my opinion, word of mouth and networking and just and hearing from folks that have had interactions with them. It could be, like I said, it could be a claims examiner who's working with a partner company. It could be a payer that used to work somewhere else and has now moved, and they can give you really good feedback. But I think you have to do that, you know, word of mouth and reach out to the people that you know. But Anita, I couldn't agree more. When you have the opportunity to then interview, asking those kind of questions, it's a mutual interview process in my point of view. Of course, the organization needs to be listening to what the candidate is saying, but the candidate needs to be hearing it at the same time to make sure that they're hearing what they want to hear. It's so important that both parties are looking for the right fit for each other. When it's one-sided, it tends not to work out. So I would be so impressed if a candidate asked me hard questions about the culture, the company, historical, you know, pieces that they may have heard about, anything like that. It tells me that you care enough to do that level of research, and that tells me that you're somebody I'd want on our team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, me too. And Kerri, I'll just add one other thing. You know, I think one of the things that makes me so sad is when somebody comes back to me and says, you know, I took this new job and it just was not what I thought it was going to be. I mean, sometimes that happens, but a lot of times it is because you didn't ask those questions during the interview. And to your point, Kerri, it's a two-way process. You're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. And so one of the questions you should always ask is, you know, what does a day look like in this job? Just so you can validate that the job you think you're interviewing for is the same job that they're interviewing you for.
And I think that's, you know, kind of what I was talking about with, you know, being very specific in your conversation, you know, knowing what you've researched and you're soul searching, like I call it, and then, you know, taking that and really having that conversation in that interview. There's another question in the chat if we have a second. Christine Morgan asks, Anita, any resources or organization you use to start researching how to start your own business and forming an LLC, etc.?
Yeah, so Christine, I actually joined my local Chamber of Commerce, and they have an affiliation with the Small Business Association, and I spent a lot of time with the people from the Small Business Association. They're probably sick of me at this point, but you know, I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was getting into, and you know, I asked a lot of questions, and I looked at market data, you know, and I don't know if all of those things that I learned during that process are going to apply, but it certainly allowed me to feel more confident in what I was doing. And they'll also coach you around, you know, should you become incorporated or be an LLC? And those are very personal questions that you'll need to answer. And also my accountant helped with that decision as well.
Great. Thank you, ladies. I wanted just to go back and touch on one more topic, and we touched on it a little bit, but it's really just about how candidates may look different and how people that are in hiring roles may be looking for something different today than they may have been this time last year based on where we've been. And I did pull some professionals in our space to say, hey, what does that really look like? Because not all of us are in the recruiting or hiring mode all the time. And just to share a little bit, I mean, I think at least from the perspective of folks that I asked, there is an interesting pool out there today, right? Those folks that are in specialty trained areas, I don't think that the industry or the opportunities have changed so much. But what we do see, at least in my organization, is a lot of overqualified candidates applying for and I applaud people's desire and need to be employed. But I think it's really difficult when you sit in the employer seat, when you know that an employee is maybe looking for a short-term fix and you know that they have aspirations and abilities beyond the role that they're applying for. We had a little bit of chat amongst the three of us about what kind of impact that has on employers. And Anita, I know you had some good feedback on how much resource time it takes to hire and onboard an employee if you know they're not going to stay for the long haul. Do you have any thoughts on how that might be impacting the employment?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that, pre-COVID, it's expensive to hire a new employee, to train them, to get them up to speed, and only to learn, 9 months after you've gone through that 3-month process of getting them where you want them to be, that they really never had any intention of staying. They were just working out their non-compete. So that is super frustrating for an employer. I realize that people have to make a living, but, be thoughtful about the job that you're applying for, and make sure that it's something that you're doing because you want to work there. It doesn't always work out, and everybody has the right to be anywhere they want to be. But, I just think it's, and I think especially now people are going to be more discriminating, if they look at your resume and they see that, you might just be working out a non-compete, then, the market is very competitive right now. And, those things I think are going to impact the way people hire.
I wonder too, ask the same group of people, just are you seeing anything else jump out? And a lot of people said the importance of benefits. And by benefits, I mean everything you consider benefit, whether it's your medical insurance, your 401k, your PTO. I think that has become an interesting dynamic in this new era, because it seems like it's taking a more important role. Before, I would see a lot more emphasis just on the compensation. But if 2020 hasn't taught us anything, it's like we have to be prepared for the unexpected. And I think the importance of benefits and work-life balance has played a bigger part in the hiring that I've seen so far this year. And I'm just wondering, I know you mentioned, Anita, having to do that consideration as you went out on your own, but Morgan, did the benefit piece have any specific impact on your decisions through your process?
Yes, I'd say more than they did, 5-6 years ago. I'm getting married. I'm, going to probably start a family eventually. So I had a lot more questions than I did, when I was 25 at my last interview. And some places I decided it wasn't going to be a good fit because, they really didn't have the benefit packages that I wanted. And, it didn't seem like it was going to align with, my goals. At the end of the day, I keep saying it, but everything kind of had to align with what I wanted. And I was lucky. I was able to be, really specific and, look for a while and paint a lot of my house. But yeah, I'd say it definitely, it came in, isn't it nice? I think we have another question that kind of goes along with this. It's to Kerri from Leslie Yates. How would an overqualified person best communicate that they are looking for a long-term company that they can call home, stay and grow within a slower fashion? To Morgan's point, life goals and intention change.
Thank you for your question, Leslie. Honestly, the only thing I know to say about that is it's part of the process, and you've just got to be completely open in that process and share exactly that.
Right.
Personal experience, I did have a candidate who was applying for something that was much below where they wanted to be, made a compelling argument about how they wanted to be in that position right now. But when I really pushed about, well, where do you want to be a year or 2 years from now, their goals were very vastly different than where that position was going to grow over the course of the next 1 or 2 years. And 1 or 2 years isn't really that long. And so I'm thinking, if you're going to be unsatisfied in a year, I'm probably not doing you any favors and you're not doing yourself any favors. So it really comes down to, can you convince the person you're talking to that that's really your intention, that is your path, and then that person is really honest with you about what they need long term, whether in that position or the growth potential they see in other positions in the organization. But like most things in this life, I never have the right answer. The only thing I know how to do is to try to talk about it. If you can't have that kind of open, clear, and honest conversation during the interview process, you won't have it when you go to work there. I think you just got to put it out on the table and make a convincing argument backed by fact.
Yeah, and I think oh no, I was just gonna say, I
would also suggest, sorry, Morgan.
It's like maybe a backward step, but that backward step is going to put you on a different career path. I think, explaining, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I want to do. This is going to help me get there. Do you want to grow with me? And I think if you are authentic and saying those things, I've never been in the employer position where I got to tell somebody they got a job, but I would assume that if anybody's sitting there saying, help me grow with you, I want to do great things, this is what I want to do, and this is going to help me get there, and I'm going to be a great employee, this is where I want to be, I can't imagine somebody sitting there and saying no. So that's my thought on that.
I also think, you have to demonstrate the same enthusiasm for the path that you're on, and be able to communicate that enthusiasm. So, yes, you might be taking a step back, but you're excited to be taking that step back so that you can do this in the future or whatever. So, to both of these ladies' points, being able to articulate and communicate what it is you're trying to accomplish so that an employer can understand it's really not a step back for you.
I like
it's
that.
A change in trajectory.
That wording.
Good.
Yeah, what she said.
Well, as far as the topic that we had at hand, I think I've heard a few things, so I'll just say them in closing, and we can jump in as you all wish, or see if there's any additional questions. But what I heard is, as you're on this path to finding your new role or landing your next role, it's to have a plan, be patient, be prepared, be selective. I heard that one from both of you. And then always present your most authentic self to make sure that you find an organization that aligns with your purpose and your personal goals and desires, so that you can live out a long and fulfilling career in whatever position it is you land. Any other thoughts, ladies?
Oh, it was me. No, I think, we covered it all. And if anybody has any questions or wants to connect, please, connect with us on LinkedIn or, on here. There's direct messages. We would love to, talk further. I love talking, so.